Pests can be a real pain in the ass here in Florida. So let's talk about some of the most effective ways that I've found to handle these pesky little buggers. I've been gardening in Florida for a little bit over 10 years now. And I've had a lot of plants eaten by a lot of bugs. And there's nothing more frustrating than putting all this hard work into growing a beautiful garden just to have some stupid little bugs eat your fruit before you do. But there's actually more good bugs than there are bad bugs, and that's why spraying pesticides is never my first option, even the organic ones. There's much better ways to handle your pest problem than sprays. But before we get into all of the different solutions that we have, let's learn to identify some of the most common pests that you'll see here in Florida really quickly. The first one and the most common one that I see in my garden is the aphid. Aphids live on the undersides of the leaves of your plants. They're small, a few millimeters at most. They can come in a bunch of different colors. There's black, brown, yellow, green. They also secrete this honeydew-like substance that ants really, really love. So oftentimes with an aphid infestation, what you'll find is ants crawling up and down your plant. The next common pest that you'll see here in Florida is whiteflies, and they are exactly like they sound. They're little white flies, maybe a 1/16 of an inch long. Another common pest that you may see are leaf-footed bugs, stink bugs, shield bugs. I've heard people call them a couple of different names. A lot of times you'll see these things in their nymph stage. They are usually red and black, and they will group up in a pack, typically on a fruit like a tomato or something like that, or a pepper. But they look really, really similar to an assassin bug, which is actually a good bug in the garden. So be sure you do your research and identify that before you start killing. Another really common pest here that you're going to see in Florida are nematodes, specifically root knot nematodes. Nematodes are actually tiny little microscopic worms that live in your soil, and they affect the roots of your plants. The symptoms that your plants will show are like drought stress or nutrient deficiency, just a general like unhealthy looking plant. You'll know that you have root knot nematodes when you pull up your plant and you notice you got all these like little balls and bulbs all down the roots. It makes it really hard for your plants to actually uptake those nutrients. Nematodes can be a little bit difficult to handle in the garden, but we've got some ways that I'll talk about here pretty soon. Another common pest you're going to see are snails or slugs. They eat the leaves of your plants. They just give like irregular chew marks. Typically, you'll find them in the morning or late evening when the plants have some dew on them. They really like a moist condition. You'll also see a ton of caterpillars here in Florida. There's so many different caterpillars, but I'll just talk about 3 really common ones. The tomato hornworm, which is this big, green, alien-looking worm with a little horn on the end. It can defoliate a tomato plant within a matter of days. These things will devour your plants. Another common worm that you're going to see is the cabbage looper. It gets its name looper because it moves kind of like a little inchworm. It loops when it moves. And you'll also see the squash borer bug, which attacks things like pumpkins, squash, cucumbers, that kind of thing. Those actually bore into the vine of your plant and eat it from the inside out. Those are a little bit more difficult to control as well, because once they're inside, it's a little bit tricky to find them. And the last pest that I'll quickly mention is mealybugs. They're a lot like aphids, where they hang out on the undersides of your leaves. They suck the juices out of your plant. They leave a honeydew substance behind. Pretty similar to aphids. Now that we know a lot of the common pests here in Florida, let's talk about ways to deal with them. And again, the most effective ways are not pesticides. It's not spraying your plants. It actually starts with your soil. This was a game changer for me when I started thinking about the garden this way. The more life and organic matter you can have in your soil, the stronger your plants will be, and the easier it's going to be for them to fight off all of those pesky pests. So what's the easiest way to really build our soil? It's super simple. Compost and mulch, organic material. So if you're noticing that your plants are being attacked by pests or they're looking a little weak, the first thing you should start with is let's build our soil. Let's add some organic matter. Let's add some compost. Let's mulch these things if you're not. Build your soil. Add organic material. But let's say you already have a pack of aphids or whiteflies or mealybugs or whatever. Building your soil is not a fix for that. It's more of a preventative measure that will help you over time handle pests. You would be surprised at how kind of stupid, simple, easy it is to get rid of some of these things. One of the most effective ways to get rid of most pests is a strong jet of water. Spray them, knock them off of your plant. It's surprisingly effective. You are going to be left with some stragglers. There's going to be some bugs on the underside of your leaves still or whatever. The best way I like to handle them can be seen as maybe a little barbaric, but I like to squish them. The manual method of hand picking, spraying, or squishing is how I like to deal with aphids, mealybugs, whiteflies, and most caterpillars, as well as snails and slugs. If you are choosing the manual route, know that this is not a quick fix. You're going to be out here for a couple of days in a row managing this situation, regularly spraying them off and squishing them. And I understand that's not the most convenient or easy way to handle pests in the garden, but in my opinion, it's the best and most environmentally friendly way to do it. And that's really what I kind of focus on when I'm thinking about pest control in the garden, is how are these sprays and insecticides affecting our local community? In actuality, our garden is just a tiny piece of the larger ecosystem. And if everybody in the neighborhood is just using a little bit of these pesticides, it might be technically considered safe until we start adding up all of the usage around the neighborhood. Before you know it, we could have an issue on our hands. All right, let me get off my soapbox and start talking about some other ways that we can handle these things. Whiteflies are another one that can get out of hand relatively quickly. Each whitefly can lay a ton of eggs in its life cycle, and they have a life cycle of about 2 to 4 weeks. So whiteflies are another pest that you're going to have to be out here relatively often handling them in the garden. A great preventative measure for whiteflies are little yellow sticky traps. You can put them in your garden. Whiteflies will be attracted to the yellow color, land on the paper, and they'll get stuck. This is a preventative measure, so not exactly helping you when your plant is already infested with whiteflies. But if you do have an infestation, one of the best ways that I've found to handle is actually by making a homemade soap spray. The base for this spray is Dr. Bronner's Castile soap. Most gardeners have found best results when they've used the lavender or peppermint scented soaps. I almost said flavors. The mixture for this spray is 1 tablespoon of soap per quart of water. So if you're using a gallon sprayer, use 4 tablespoons. And when you spray it, you want to completely cover the plant. Tops, bottoms, stems, everything. Again, not a quick fix. Life cycle of 2 to 4 weeks. You're going to have to be out here if you're dealing with an infestation for at least 2 weeks spraying. Not every single day, but really often. Probably when you first notice the issue with whiteflies, you'll have to be out here maybe the first 3 days in a row spraying, and then maybe alternating days after that, just handling whiteflies as you see them pop up. This spray is also effective for aphids and mealybugs, and it's a really environmentally friendly spray that's not going to add a bunch of toxins or chemicals to your garden. Okay, so slugs and snails, another pretty common pest you're going to see here in Florida. Again, they usually eat your leaves, and you'll see some like irregular chew marks in the leaves. You'll notice them early morning, late in the evening. A lot of gardeners have found a simple, effective way to deal with these is by taking a small container, like maybe an old yogurt container or sour cream or something like that, burying that into the garden and actually filling it with beer. The snails can't resist. They go in for a little drink, fall in, and then they can't get out and they drown. But I have a hard time wasting good beer, so I typically opt for hand picking those as well. Another great option for deterring snails and slugs is by planting plants that they really don't like in the garden. Or vice versa, you could plant plants that they really, really love as almost a sacrificial plant. A lot of gardeners call this companion planting. Marigolds are one of the easiest options that you can choose to plant in your Florida garden. You can find them almost anywhere at all of the local big box stores. You can find them. Most pests really dislike the smell of these plants. And they're a great chop and drop, which I'll talk about in a minute, to add back to your garden. Some other really good companion plants are sweet alyssum, nasturtium, chamomile, sun hemp, and most herbs. That's not a comprehensive list, but those are probably going to be really easy to find, and I think really easy to grow, and they look really nice in your garden. And these plants work by either deterring pests or drawing good pests in. Remember way back in the beginning of the video when I said there's actually more good bugs than there are bad bugs? That is totally true. Basically, the more bugs that you can draw into your garden, the more diversity you have in your garden, the better. An example of a fantastic good bug are parasitic wasps, and marigolds are one of their favorite plants. The way that parasitic wasps work is kind of crazy. The first time I saw it, I was like, yo, what the hell is going on here? They actually will lay their eggs into worms like the tomato hornworm, and their worms and their eggs will feed off of the worms and just eat them from the inside out. And now you'll have more parasitic wasps and less worms in your garden. And don't think I forgot about the dreaded nematode, a big one here in Florida. Nematodes can be kind of difficult to control. There is no quick fix for nematodes besides just planting in pots or fresh soil. But what I have found, as well as many other gardeners have found, is by growing some plants like nematodes, sun hemp, and even sorghum in their garden and using them as a chop and drop. So basically what that means is you grow these plants and then you chop them down into smaller pieces and work those back into the soil. By doing that, that will eventually deter nematodes from living in your soil. This can take about 6 months, though, to begin being effective. So if you're noticing issues with nematodes, I would highly suggest planting those 3 things and working them into your garden soil throughout the year. Another alternative to pesticides or spraying is by using things called trap crops. And these are basically sacrificial crops that you're going to plant in your garden that you want pests to eat and lay eggs onto. Some really effective trap crops that I think actually also look really cool here in Florida are sunflowers and sorghum. After all of this, though, if you still feel like you want to spray your garden and use some sort of chemical control, here are 2 that I recommend. Neem oil is a fantastic one that is organic, and it's going to help you with things like aphids, mealybugs, white flies, etc. And then if you're dealing with caterpillars or worms in your garden, BT is another one. It works as a toxin that after the caterpillar has ingested it, it actually paralyzes them and kills them. Here's another really super simple, quick tip to help reduce pests, and it has to do with watering. Try to avoid overhead watering as much as you can. By soaking the leaves with water, it's just drawing pests into the garden. So if you can set up a really simple drip irrigation system, I would highly recommend it. If you can't, then just focus on watering towards the base of the plant. There's no need to spray the entire plant with water. Another really effective way to handle pests is to get out and look in your garden every single day. 5 minutes, that's all you need. Set a reminder on your Google Calendar or a timer on your phone, whatever it is. Get out and just look at your plants for 5 minutes a day. It's a lot easier to handle pests before they get out of control than it is when there's a full-blown infestation. So if you found this helpful, I also have a 100% free Florida gardening guide. It's designed to help gardeners in all parts of the state start vegetable gardening and grow more food. We break the state down into north, central, and south. We give you timing for each vegetable, a bunch of Florida-friendly varieties, and even some layout help in the garden. I'll put a link to that down below. Also, if you found this video helpful, you might find either of these 2 videos helpful for growing more food in Florida. Really hope this helps, and have a good day.